And I want to read you a little bit, a few passages out of 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and 14. I'll just do 14. Earnestly pursue love, this is verse 1, yet earnestly desire spiritual gifts, but especially, everybody say especially, that you may prophesy. Especially that you may prophesy. Verse 2, for the one who speaks in tongues does not speak to men but to God, for no one understands, but in his spirit he speaks mysteries. Verse 3, but the one who prophesies speaks to men, listen to this, for edification, exhortation, and consolation. Edification, exhortation, and consolation. I want to say a few things about the gift of prophecy. First of all, it's a gift. That means it's not an award. It means it's not a sign that you're that you're mature, or even that you have great character. And some folks have been taught, like, when I get to a certain place in God, then I'll ask for the gifts. How many understand that or maybe you're like, I just want the fruit of the Spirit, not the gifts. It's actually not a suggestion. It's actually earnestly desire spiritual gifts, especially that you would prophesy. And how many understand it's very selfish to not ask for the gifts of the Spirit? Because the gifts aren't for you, they're for the people who need them. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, there are 9 gifts listed, gifts of the Spirit. I personally think there's many more than 9 gifts. Sorry, I'm going through puberty. Many more than 9 gifts. Someone said when I bought my Corvette, I was going through a midlife crisis, and I bought it at 60. So I'm like, that's a good thing right there. So the gifts of the Spirit, first of all, they're gifts. They're not awards. You don't get them for maturity. You get them when you ask. There are 9 gifts listed in 1 Corinthians 12. And the gift of prophecy, the word of knowledge, the gift of discernment, the gift of miracles, the gift of faith, and there's a whole bunch more in there. We can read them later, but we're actually going after the gift of prophecy. I want to talk about the difference between a word of knowledge and prophecy. A word of knowledge is information you got by the Holy Spirit that's currently true. You could have Googled it. You could have got on the internet and got it. It's information that's currently true. But you got it by the Holy Spirit. Maybe you got a name. Maybe you've got a situation. Last night, Michael was demonstrating when he was sharing about, before he prophesied, he often would say, I saw this thing happen to you. You went through this thing. How many know that's not prophecy? He was actually calling out a word of knowledge. He was giving information to the person that likely they knew. And what he's doing is he's building their faith, connecting in trust. And it kind of goes like this. Well, if he knows my past, then he's probably accurate about my future. Are you with me? So word of knowledge is something you use often, build faith. And then we also use it for things like someone's got a problem with their knee. So it's like words of knowledge for healing. Or in my case, when I was in the automotive repair business, I actually found out that the Holy Spirit knows how to fix cars. And I would actually, in the early days, I'd lay hands on the car and say, Holy Spirit, what's wrong with this car? And then I'd charge for it. So a word of knowledge is something that is currently true. So if I called you out and I said, I see you as a nurse, and you're a nurse, how many know that's a good word, but it's not a prophecy? Prophecy is foretelling, which means I'm telling you the future, and forthtelling, which means I'm causing the future. This is really important. There's foretelling and forthtelling. Sometimes things don't happen unless you speak things that are not as though they are. You remember the story of Ezekiel, Ezekiel's bones in the 37th chapter of Ezekiel, when God takes Ezekiel down to a boneyard, basically an old battlefield, and he asks him the question, can these bones live? How many understand that as Ezekiel prophesied and the bones came to life, he was not foretelling. He was not telling the future. He was forthtelling. He was causing the future. Often when we prophesy to somebody, I think, first of all, let me back up and say, it's important that we know the difference between word of knowledge and prophecy, because oftentimes we call things that are not in people as though they are. And when we do, we give them grace. And grace is not just undeserved favor. Grace is the operational power of God. And grace gives them the ability to do what they couldn't do 1 second before they heard the prophecy. Are you following me? So sometimes, if I call you out and I say, I see you as a nurse, and you're like, well, you got that one wrong. I'm not a nurse. See, Jesus said if you receive a prophet in the name of a prophet, then you receive the prophet's reward. What is the prophet's reward? The ability to do what you couldn't do before you heard that prophecy. I find that the Lord oftentimes prophesies things to us that we never desired. We wouldn't pray them, so he tells us from the outside what he has in mind for us. And I don't mean always, I mean often. And so the Lord's like, someone says to you, I see you in Africa. You're like, I don't even like Africans. I'm not going to Africa. Or I don't like Africa. Or I've never had any desire to go to Africa. And the challenge is that if you flush that word instead of at least put it on a shelf, you won't receive the grace that God had intended for that word in your life. And so when God prophesies to you, it's important that you have value for it, because how many know the value you place on the word determines the power you receive from the word? Did you get that? And so prophecy is always about the future. And prophecy gives you the ability to do what you couldn't do 1 second before you heard it.